Galvanic Servohaulers. I've been using this as a proxy, but let's be honest, it's a bit It's definitely time to scratch build one. I started with my Lego bits box. I was looking for wheels and tracks, because God knows I don't want to have to make them. I decided pretty quickly I wanted 3 wheels in each track, so I built a small cardboard model so I could figure out the measurements, and during this process I had my 3D printer printing off some printed parts that I could use those printed parts in this bloody model. And to make sure that those printed parts were perfectly proficient for the production of this model, I test fitted one into some cardboard and gave it a quick paint job. Then, using a highly scientific scaled measuring device, I turned to my computer and came up with this design. The next step was to break this design down into a cutting template to make assembly nice and straightforward. The aforementioned highly scientific scaled measuring device has more than one use. In conjunction with a surgical tool, it allows for precise dissections of your chosen substrate, in my case, styrene. Now that's all cut out, we can get on with building the thing. This is the top piece, and these the base pieces, which we can get shot of for now, because the first thing I need to do is make sure that the curves in the sides of the body are the same. We're going to use some masking tape to tape these two sections together, because the curved parts need to accommodate a 6mm in diameter paper straw. To ensure that these parts are level, I've got a rounded file, and I'm just going to make sure that the curves are as symmetrical as possible. Using some Gorilla super glue, I can then glue in what I'm calling the engine bays. Then we can just glue all the rest of the parts together. And if you don't want to use styrene, you can build this out of chipboard, graphics medium, craft board, whatever you want to call it. Next we break out the Princess Spackle to fix any human error. I am one big human error. Then my camera catches a case of the Kevin Bacons like it's 1990, and I can break out one of my favourite tools. I made 4 cuts, 2 on the arch window, and then removed the centre section from this piece of Lego. I've cut and superglued a piece of styrene to fit inside the arch. I'm going to make sure I fill any gaps because I want this to look like sheet metal. I know what you're thinking, what's a window got to do with a servo hauler? But trust me, I've got a plan. Once I've got it all lined up, very roughly 90 degrees, it's time to add the control panel. It's almost like this was my plan all along. I then added a chimney using some parts from the trigger section of a squeezy bottle and a couple of small pieces of Lego. I did use some baking powder to help the bond, and also conveniently looks a little bit like welds. Then it was time to add the 2 pieces we rescued from the Lego axle so that we've got something to attach our 3rd wheels to. After that, old man Cap needed to get his magnifying glass out so he could see the lights that we wanted to glue to the front of this servo hauler, and it was starting to look like the thing it was supposed to be. Remember the 6mm paper straw I was talking about? Well, this is going to become our axles, and that diameter is perfect to fit these pieces of Lego, which we will attach the wheels to. I also added a toothpick through the centre just for some added strength to stop any bowing, and I glue the wheels in place so that long term it doesn't ruin any paint job. It still needs something on the front, but I want to take this opportunity to say that I'm having a great time with styrene. This was actually the first thing I ever made using this material. Then I made this shipping container. In a poll, you guys asked me to do a video on the shipping container, so if you do want to see that, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. If you like how I ended up using this window, hit that like button. I told you I had a plan. Another piece from that spray bottle and another couple of pieces of Lego turned out to be perfect to add to this scratch build. Now I just need some chain and a hook. Fortunately, I had both. I just need to make a hitch, and that should be pretty easy out of a cocktail stick and a couple of pieces of styrene. That'll do. And to finish the building process, I need rivets. Lots and lots of rivets. A hole punch and the lid for some margarine will do the job just nicely. Gluing them on is fairly straightforward. Sharp knife, get yourself a rivet, dip it in super glue, put it in place. Given enough time, it looks like this. My favourite part is priming it because it brings everything together and stops it looking like a kid's toy you'll find in the pound shop. But I have just figured out that it looks a little bit like Wallace from the front, but I can live with that. Breaking out my airbrush, I give the whole thing a good undercoat of gunmetal grey. One stride, I give it a quick varnish with the rattle can just to make sure I don't rub any of the paint off with my fingers. I'm no fancy painter, I like to keep it a very simple process. So once I have my base layer down, I like to just block in the colours until I have a scheme that I'm comfortable with. This is my favourite yellow, but for this build it's a bit too yellow, so I add a very thin red wash just to warm it up a little bit. Once that's dry, I'm coming in with a black wash, and this is going everywhere. I want to cover the entire build in this. I'm going to do it quite thick around where all the details are, and then where the flat parts of the build are, I'm going to very gently kind of stipple it on so that it doesn't have a brushed on look. And we end up with this. It's looking suitably grimy, but there's still more to do. And after adding a couple of transfers, I take a small piece of scourer ripped from a sponge to speckle on some paint chips. Out comes the airbrush again, but this time it's to cover the entire build in some matte varnish. I like to varnish all my models. It protects the paint from greasy pores and unifies the finish, because all the paints and washes we use all dry differently. But it also mattes the metal paints, so the finishing touch to the metal has to be a dry brush. I also go in with a brush on a few selected areas, and after a few added details, this is what we ended up with. If I can build this, you can too. I'm an idiot, and I'm even going to make it easier for you. The basic template and the STL files that I use will be available on my website. If you've enjoyed the video and found it useful, please hit that like button, subscribe and ring that notification bell for more videos. And here's another one you can watch right now.